I can't think of a brand that's consistently better at building special editions than Mini, and ultimately it's the attention to detail that sets them apart, and this new 1965 Victory Edition is no different. Well, a little more attention could be paid to the name, which is technically something like the Mini Cooper John Cooper Works 3-door 1965 Victory Edition. Whatever it is, it's a mouthful. Now moving on, it's hard to find a new car with a higher fun factor than this one. It definitely isn't cheap, but as far as pure joy goes, this Mini's about as good as it gets. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Right out of the gate, I know there might be some confusion about the name and not just the jumble of words I mentioned earlier. I'm talking about the body style itself, because I know in the US it's called the Mini Cooper 2-door, but here in Canada we call it the 3-door, just like they call it in the UK, which is where this car was born. So that seems far more appropriate to me. And then JCW, well, that's short for John Cooper Works, which is the brand's performance division. It's sort of akin to BMW's M or Cadillac's V. Yeah, most people shorten it to JCW, which does make it a little more digestible. But that means that this is the sportiest version of the Mini Cooper you can buy. And let me tell you, it is pretty sporty. It's very similar to the Volkswagen Golf GTI, both in execution and performance. It uses a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, just like the GTI. It makes 228 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. Now, something I should mention is that the Mini Countryman also comes in a JCW version, but that thing is far more crossover than car. Yeah, it's 0 to 100 kilometer an hour. Sprint time is about a half a second quicker, but it also weighs about 800 pounds more. The big difference is the output. It makes something like 315 horsepower versus this 228. Now, beyond the size, the output, and the speed, the biggest difference between this and the Countryman is the drive configuration, because this only comes in a front-wheel drive format, yes, just like the GTI, whereas the Countryman is all-wheel drive. And it's also capable of some fun, but if you want more of it, this is hands down the way to go. This car is an absolute blast to drive. Yeah, I miss the manual just like anyone else who enjoys driving, but this is still very fun. It's also, of course, got paddle shifters, so you can manually manipulate this 7-speed dual clutch transmission, which does have some quirks, but none of them are entirely out of character for this style of transmission. But we should talk about them anyways. And really, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a sort of hesitation when you're rolling away from a stop. But where you'll really notice it is if you're switching, I don't know, from drive to reverse and back again. It just kind of gets confused, doesn't respond right away. And that also conspires with the ignition stop-start system and the auto hold functionality that allows you to bring the car to a stop, depress the brake pedal, and then let your foot off the brake, and it'll stay in place until you hit the accelerator again. All that stuff makes it behave a little abnormally, but again, it's not entirely out of character for this type of transmission. And this thing does shift very quickly, especially if you put it in sport mode. Now, something else we should talk about, these paddles themselves. The one on the left, it acts as a boost function. So if you hold it down for a few seconds, it uncorks the entire powertrain's potential for 10 seconds at a time, which is handy if you want to, I don't know, pass slower traffic without switching drive modes entirely. If you want to do that, just reach down here and flick this toggle labeled experiences, which is one of those things where an automaker has decided to reinvent something. It's so unnecessary. I don't know why it doesn't just say modes, but either way, that's what it does. And if you flip it up, it's going to put it in the John Cooper Works mode, which is go-kart mode. You have to go ahead and acknowledge that it's going to turn off traction control. That's if you want to have some serious fun, if you want to take it to the track, which this car is very much at home at, but it is one of those things where you are going to pay the price literally. And I don't just mean the asking price for this car, I mean at the pumps, because yes, it's rated to burn something like 7.7 liters per 100 kilometers combined, but as soon as you start having just a little bit of fun behind the wheel, well, that number grows. And speaking of the wheel, that's maybe my one sticking point in here. This is such a thick rimmed steering wheel, big and chunky. Yeah, it's a BMW part spin piece, go figure, but I just don't think it matches the overall vibe here. This is a small car, it's so nimble, and it just sort of dulls the experience a little bit. It's almost like playing basketball with gloves on. Now, another quirk you might notice is this round touchscreen, which is undeniably adorable, but it's also sort of frustrating to use. Not the interface itself, it does function pretty well with its native system. Even the built-in navigation is pretty good, but if you like to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you're going to notice that that's a shrunken format because, of course, neither of those are designed to work with a round screen. And yeah, it might not seem like a big deal until you go ahead and pull up Google Maps. That's where it's problematic, because all that wasted space means you really have to kind of narrow in on it in order to see what's going on. And yes, one cool thing about most modern cars is that those third-party nav systems, well, they finally give you turn-by-turn directions in an instrument display or a head-up display like this Mini has. But if you want a map view, which I prefer, especially if I'm in an unfamiliar area and I'm trying to get my bearings, you have no choice but to look down at this screen. And I just wish it was a bigger view. And it's not necessarily the amount of display that's taken up, it's the fact that it's not the entire thing. It's hard to kind of remember that you need to focus in on just that middle part. Anyways, I know it might seem like a minor complaint, but I don't like it. And then the interface itself, yeah, it works fairly well, but there is a learning curve to it. No, it's not insurmountable, but it's a little on the steep side. So simple stuff like, I don't know, activating the heated seats, well, takes a few extra pokes and prods than you might expect, especially because if you look here, the icon is very tiny and it's hard to see at a glance. I don't love that. But one thing I do want to say, I've complained about this with lots of vehicles for a long time. Voice commands that don't do simple things like be able to call up Apple CarPlay, but this can do it. And I think it is great because it means if you have the climate menu pulled up here and then you want to switch back to your map view, but you don't want to take your eyes off the road, well, you can just hit this button here on the steering wheel to activate the voice commands and then tell the car what to do and it'll pull it up. Yeah, it's a little cumbersome, but I think it's a cool feature that deserves a shout out. Open Apple CarPlay. A lot gets made about the Mini being not so mini anymore, but let's face it, this is already a very niche vehicle, and making it any smaller would limit its appeal even further, which would give BMW even less of a reason to build it in the first place. And besides, relative to its size, there is a good amount of space in here. I always remind you guys, I'm about 6'4", but I can fit very comfortably in that driver's seat. Although with a helmet on for a track day, probably not so much. Also, don't expect much in terms of cargo room, but there's enough space in the back for your groceries. Hell, I can even fit the chair that I bring to every one of these shoots back there. What? Now, this car is an homage to the 1965 Monte Carlo Rally winner, which is why it's only available in red and why the roof is white, just like the original. And along with these mirror caps, sort of a unique touch because you usually cannot get the JCW that way, so that's kind of cool. Anyways, that's also why there are these 52 decals on both doors, these 1965 badges on the C-pillars, that Victory Edition decal on the back. My favorite touch here, though, has to be the original car's number plate that's ghosted into that stripe on the hood. Kind of hard to see at certain angles, but it is very neat. And then there are more touches inside, but I gotta stop at the very first one, and that's this sticker inside the door. Another little shout out to that 1965 car, but this one, it was put on crooked, and I don't know about you guys, but I'd be pretty pissed if I spent this kind of money on a car to have to look at a crooked sticker. Anyways, besides that, there are some cool touches like 3D printed accents on the steering wheel, the console bin, and even the key fob to shout out that 1965 car. Now, I do want to get back to performance because that's what this car is all about. And I don't just mean the drive modes, although let's go ahead and put it back in that go-kart setting. Since we're on the subject, I'm going to hit activate go-kart, and those burbles and pops are excellent. I'm not a big fan of those backfire bros that modify their Infinities or their BMWs, but this is very tasteful. It sounds really, really good. Yeah, it's a little amplified in here, but I like it a lot. Beyond that, though, the handling is a true highlight. Now, this does ride on a sport suspension. It's got adaptive dampers. One issue, it is very stiff. This is not a comfortable ride by any stretch of the imagination. You are going to feel every pressure crack, every pothole. You're going to be trying to avoid them, but even little things. It also gets very loud in here on porous pavement with these low profile tires. But the payoff is when you are having a little bit of fun. This thing has those higher spring rates, short rebound strokes, and of course, stiff sway bars. And it makes this an absolute joy to drive. This is a marvel of modern dynamics. I know it's missing the manual transmission. I know it's not perfect, but I'd say it's pretty damn good. This really is one of the most fun cars to drive on the market today. But the question remains, is it worth the money? Because Mini wants 58 grand before tax in Canada for one of these one of 45 1965 Victory Editions. And you know, next to the JCW itself, not so bad. It's only a few grand more, but it's the competition that poses a problem no matter how thin it is. To recap, I like the way the Mini Cooper JCW drives, how well this 1965 Victory Edition comes together, and how roomy it is inside considering its size. I don't like the infotainment interface, the chunky steering wheel, or how expensive it is next to something like the Volkswagen GTI. It's hard to compare anything to a Mini, let alone a special edition like this one, but if you take a look at a fully kitted out GTI, it's a good 12,000 bucks less than the JCW, and then this one's another few grand on top of that, which makes it impossible to justify based on price alone. But ultimately, this is the sort of decision where if you know you want it, there is nothing else like it. And in the case of this 1965 Victory Edition, you are getting a very special version of an exceptionally fun car.